And so welcome everybody, welcome to Husky Bites. This is a free Zoom webinar hosted by Michigan Tech. My name is Janet Callahan. I'm the Dean of the College of Engineering, which has approximately 37 undergraduate students, approximately another 1,000-ish or so graduate students, 135 faculty and staff to support them. And our mission is to teach and do research and to kind of bring our world-class education across the United States. And so I want to thank Walt Shalm, who is supporting student scholarships. And so thank you, Walt, for sponsoring this evening. If anybody would ever like to give in support of student scholarships, please do so and just let me know. And we will acknowledge your gift is either with your name or with an anonymous if you prefer. All gifts go in support of students. We also live stream through Facebook. And so if you ever have difficulty joining us live via Zoom, just look up Michigan Tech College of Engineering and join our Facebook Live session. We also post these. So if you miss one, you can watch them on the Michigan Tech College of Engineering website. So we'd like to launch a poll. I always kind of want to know who our audience is this season. And so Sue will launch this poll if it's available soon. And if not, think about what your first best answer might be. So you might be a student, you might be a student thinking about college, you might be a friend of Michigan Tech, you might be an alum, you might be an educator, you might just be a curious person, which I hope we have lots of curious people, and you might be an alum. And so this live poll is showing that 80% of the people joining us at this point who've answered the poll so far are an alum of Michigan Tech. And so welcome alumni, and also welcome students, welcome faculty and staff, welcome future students, welcome educators, welcome curious people. And thank you for joining us. It's just such a pleasure to host this. So we're gonna end that poll. And now if you don't want to see that box anymore, if you just click the upper red thing in the upper left corner, it'll go away and you won't have to see it anymore. All right, next slide. And my computer's frozen. There we go. I want to welcome any K-12 educators who are here. Those educators in the state of Michigan can earn sketches. It's a state continuing ed clock hour. If you would like to do that, please email engineering@mtu.edu and we will make sure you get credit for attending. All right, so this is where Cynthia, you can help me explain this. So first, let me introduce my co-host, who is Cynthia Hodges. Cynthia is an alum of Michigan Tech, who graduated with a BS and MS in mechanical engineering. She then had a 32-year career at Ford Motor Company, and we're so proud of her, working as a product test engineer in their durability engineering lab. Chassis engineering, fuel, steering systems, suspension, tires, wheels, and brakes for all kinds of cars and trucks at Ford. From Warren, Michigan, and her, we got a family of alumni and husband, son, a whole bunch of people who went to Tech. And so Cynthia, as I said in the slow intro, it was Cynthia's idea to focus this first Husky Bite on Winter Carnival because it's the 100th anniversary of Winter Carnival. So meanwhile, Cynthia Hodges has become our, what are we called? You're our Wikipedia editor.
Yeah, I'm the Wikipedian in residence. Right. So at Michigan Tech. So my goal with that is to improve the articles and information shared on Wikipedia about Michigan Tech. And so our first project here is this Wikipedia Edit-A-Thon, and anyone can do it. That's the beauty of Wikipedia. We're going to be working on that this Saturday, but you can work on it virtually from anywhere and at any time. So if you're interested in helping make our Winter Carnival article that's on Wikipedia better, that would be great. Just send me an email at chodges@mtu.edu and I'll get you started. And also we're looking to collect any kind of, I'm going to use a fancy word that Lindsay would use. It's a big word for an engineer to say the word ephemera, But if you have any items you'd like to donate to the archives or share about Winter Carnival, Winter Carnival pictorials, pictures, whatever you might have, posters, whatever, we'd love to have them and add them to the collection. We do have a lot of digital things online that you can look at too. So if you're interested in helping out with editing Wikipedia with me and getting your historian game on, just send me an email and we'll get you started.
Outstanding. So I'm going to spell out her email. It's CHODGES@mtu.edu. And so thank you, Cynthia, for being our Wikipedia editor. All right. And so my computer is sluggish. I'm having internet issues. I bet my husband is watching a game. So I'm going to, I think I've shared everything I was trying to, because I cannot advance my slides anymore. So I'm going to hit stop share and hope there wasn't anything else I was supposed to talk about. There was though, dang it. Let me try it again, see if I can advance it. All right, I am having difficulty. So I'm going to stop trying to advance any slides and stop share. And I'm going to turn it completely over to you, Cynthia, to introduce Lindsay and take it away.
Sure thing. So I get the honor of introducing my friend Lindsey Hilton, and she is the university archivist. She grew up in Tamarack and went to Dollar Bay High School and is a current PhD student in rhetoric, theory, and culture. Did I get that right? In culture? Yep. And then she has dual master's degrees in library science and US history. And in addition to being the university archivist, is a trustee of the Historical Society of Michigan. And I think, let me know if I got this right, I think you kind of specialize in mining history and also hockey history, Lindsay, is that right? But you cover all kinds of Upper Peninsula history here at our archives. So without any further ado, I'm gonna go ahead and hand it over to Lindsay.
Thanks so much for that introduction. Just give me one moment here. I'll get our slide share. I have my slide deck handy, so we can get going here with that. I'm getting that loaded. Thanks so much to everyone that's joining us tonight. I'm so honored that I was asked to be a part of this because I think there's a lot of folks that could have been doing a very similar presentation because it's such a beloved tradition at Michigan Tech. And there's a lot of institutional knowledge and wonderful cultural memory at Michigan Tech across not just the archives department, like any of my colleagues could have done this, but also just folks in the Alumni Association and other offices across campus. So I feel very lucky to be here to share my take on Winter Carnival tonight because there's no one Winter Carnival story. There's endless stories, and this is just a brief glimpse over those past 100 years. So we'll go ahead and get rolling with that. So as Cynthia mentioned, I'm the university archivist at Michigan Tech, and I am also a PhD student. So I do focus mostly on my role as an archivist, and I'm only taking one course a week, still in the ground coursework phase of my degree. So it's one of those slow and steady wins the race kind of a thing. Oops. And I do, before I go into any presentation, whether I'm giving a talk on campus or if I'm going out into the world to talk about things that are happening in Michigan and things that are happening in local history, I do like to make an Indigenous land statement. Michigan Technological University is located within Ojibwa homelands established by the Treaty of 1842. And I share this because I think across campus, we're trying to make efforts to take ownership of where we are in the historical and cultural landscape of this place and this part of Michigan, and not so much just to acknowledge the treaties themselves, but to actually think about how those treaties impacted Native people, their traditions, their land, their culture, and the way that they practice and the way that they live. So I just like to make that statement, and feel free to do more investigation on your own accord. And I'd be happy to help with that. So reach out anytime if you have any questions. Just a little bit more about me. I am a native Yooper, as was mentioned. I did spend most of my youth in the SDC. Before even knowing that I was going to go to Michigan Tech as a student, I was a competitive figure skater. So I spent a lot of time early morning ice or very late night ice. We had to make sure that we weren't coinciding with any of the other activities at the SDC. But I was skating roughly about 15 hours a week when I was younger. And then during off ice time, we spent a lot of time running stairs, watching the Tech hockey team play. And then when I was lucky enough, my grandpa would share one of his season tickets with me. So I'd get to go to games with my dad and my grandpa. So pretty much when I wasn't in school, eating or sleeping, I was in the SDC doing something. So, you know, my tech roots start off very young. I did graduate with my social science degree in 2003. And then when my husband completed his engineering degree in electrical engineering, we moved out to Washington, DC. And that's where I began my career in libraries. I started as a library technician with the District of Columbia Public Library. And then I worked at George Mason University, Western Illinois, a brief stint at Finlandia before coming to Michigan Tech. And I've been in my current role at Tech since May of 2016, having come back into the university in 2014. I'm very generous with my time. I love to give presentations such as this. As part of the Great Michigan Read, I've been doing a lot about local history. I don't know if anyone has been reading the Great Michigan Read this year, The Women of the Copper Country by Mary Doria Russell. I've been very lucky to be able to do a lot of Zoom meetings to talk about the strike and some of the historical context in which that historical novel was written. And then I also am involved with a lot of associations, including the Society of American Archivists, Michigan Archival Association, and several other state entities. I'm also a huge hockey fan, as was mentioned, and probably the highlight of my career thus far has been being published in the Toronto's or the Hockey Hall of Fame's Legends magazine. I was asked to write about the history of hockey in Seattle to prepare for the new NHL expansion team out there. So it's been a whirlwind year, despite the pandemic that's been going on. There's been good things happening afoot that I'm just happy to mention. A little bit about the repository that I work for. So not a lot of folks know that the archives are on the garden level of the library. But we've been a part of the library almost since the archives was formalized. So in the early 1900s, there are a lot of materials that were being saved because the school deemed them as important. They knew that they wanted this history to be saved. And then in 1978, they actually hired a professional archivist to take over administering that collection, providing access, making sure that things were cataloged. And then the archive has continued to grow and acquire new collections. Our main scope of focus is the history of Michigan Tech, mainly the cultural and social history. So things like traditions like Winter Carnival, the student experience, things that relate to goings-on campus or off campus, but with a Michigan Tech push. And then we also collect just the Western Upper Peninsula more broadly. I would say about 80% of our collections are more like local history themed, so like community archives, and the industrial heritage of the region, things like that. And about 20% are Michigan Tech specific. We have a variety of format types, from photographs to newspaper clippings, manuscript collections, and we have a very large but somewhat inaccessible oversized and flat file collection. One of our short-term goals is to get a more robust cataloging of our over 25,000 flat files so people can access them and know what we have to help enhance their research, but also just to get our collections more widely known. We do have a growing digital presence. We maintain a database called the Copper Country Historical Images Database, which you can find on the library website. We have over 11,000 historical images. Anything, if you want to do a Winter Carnival search, there's a lot of good information on there, but really any topic that you can think of, just do a keyword search and you might come up with some really neat stuff. In addition, more themed towards Winter Carnival, we do have digitized Winter Carnival pictorials that are available on the library's Digital Commons website. And then we're currently working on a digitization project with the social sciences department to get Calumet and Hecla employee records up and online. So we'll have a way to access that portal on the library website. And then we're also going to geolocate those to link them with the Kuna time travelers. So there's a lot of good digital initiatives taking place. We are currently open by appointment only, so be sure to get in touch if you want to come and research, and we'll get you set up.
I gotta jump in. That's gotta be your dog throwing the toy around that we're hearing.
Oh, can you hear that bone? Yeah, he does have a
It's so
bone.
funny. It's so funny. All right. I was just sorry.
Sorry, yeah, if anyone hears that, that is my dog. I'm trying to keep him satisfied rather than barking up in his
No,
face.
it was a good plan.
Thanks, Janet. But yeah, let's dive into the topic of the day, talking about Winter Carnival. So it started in 1922. We're in this 100th year now, so let's go back to the beginning. It started as a one-night ice carnival. It was around a circus theme. They wanted to do something fun and irreverent that would get people excited, so that there were custom-made animal costumes. People created skits. It wasn't a competition skit. It was more of a performance skit at this stage. But they did have some skating contests, both speed and figure skating. These activities at the old Amphidrome, which is now where the present day D Stadium is located. And this image is just a beautiful colorized postcard of the Amphidrome from back in its heyday. But before we go into more details, we do have a poll question that comes to us from 1928. What popular winter carnival event debuted in 1928? And we'll get that poll going in just 1 second.
Everybody gets to vote. And so there's 4 choices. A is snow statues. B is the Queen competition. C is the beard competition. So this is 1928. And D is all of the above. And we have more than 260 attendees at this point. And so right now we've got nearly over 200 of them voting, and it's pretty mixed, Lindsay. It's coming in all of the above, the beard, snow statues, and the Queen is the least highly favored, but still 13% think it might be
it's
that.
fun to watch this go. I like to see where people's minds are at, like what you're thinking. We're getting right around 85% respondents right now.
So what's the answer?
All right, let's go in and let's see. In fact, it was the Queen competition. So we had our first Queen coronated in 1928. And in addition to the Queen's competition, they actually had a Winter Carnival parade as well. So it looks like only 13% of those that participated in the poll picked Queens exclusively. So kudos to you, but thanks for everyone that participated. I think it's really great because the Queen competition has been something that has been very cherished since it was brought in as part of Winter Carnival. It's not just something to, get people to showcase their skills and to put yourself on display in front of the campus community. It's also a good way to actually create those town and gown connections. Some of the sponsorships for Queens come from outside of the Michigan Tech community, while some sponsors in like the present day carnival events, are Greek organizations or different student orgs. There's also businesses out in the community like Roy's or Quincy's or different places throughout the years have been a part of that situation for the Queen. So it's nice to get people involved.
Well, and so I've been a judge at least once. I was asked by the Blue Key to be one of the several judges, and I actually asked them about the competitors. I asked them a tricky phase diagram question from material science and engineering, and I gave them enough background where anybody with good reasoning skills could probably reason their way through it. But they were just like, oh, like an oral exam. It was pretty fun. Right. So wait, on that picture, who is the Queen? Tell me it's not the man sitting in the sled.
So for this one, this is just the court. I don't know the woman's name from this picture because this wasn't actually from that particular year, because this was one of the beard competitions. We unfortunately didn't have any photographs that I could find from that 1928 that were still images, but I will mention that there was the 1928 Winter Carnival video, and it is available on the Blue Key website. So if you get onto the Blue Key website, you can look through past carnivals, and then you can also look at their rather robust collection of Winter Carnival videos that are positioned on the YouTube platform, but they do have them linked off of the Blue Key website. So if you want to see, I think it's roughly a 13-minute clip from 1928, be sure to check that out. So a little bit more about this early years. So 1929 to 1939, there was a little hiatus with the stock market crash, but there was this lack, like people were really missing Winter Carnival when it took that break after the 20s. So Blue Key actually brought it back in 1934. And that's when they started taking up their sponsorship of it. And then they continue that through this day. Some of the highlights from that 1934 rekindled carnival, there was a faculty/local merchants hockey game. The local business owners did end up winning. And there was also a float competition that was part of the parade, and they were rather robust. They weren't just, like someone pulling a wagon or a trailer. They were actually like building these epic floats that would go down through downtown Houghton. And then just this great image here. It's one of the few ones that we actually have of snow statues from the 1930s. But the caption reads, "Next time you forget the tripod, you're fired." And it's just an image of a gentleman filming something on his friend who's bending over to provide somewhere that he can put the camera since he didn't have his tripod.
Well, he would be surveying, I think, trying to survey and using his the gentleman's hind end as the tripod.
Yep, the stability needed to look through the viewfinder. So something that you don't see every day, but a whimsical take, as you can see. And then looking at another great thing that happened in the 30s was the debut of snow statues as a formal part of carnival competition. So this is the winning snow statue from that year. It's titled King Winter. So it's a great image with King Winter sitting on his throne, and then a couple young women are sitting on his lap, and these are human women on the snow statue. But it was amazing that they were able to create these structures that were so solid that people could interact with them in a physical way rather than just observing them with the eye. They could actually be a part of that statue experience. And I'm just so grateful that this image was captured and saved, because it really talks about just like the fun of being out and viewing statues and posing. We all do that, right? I've been doing that since I was a little kid. As soon as my first carnival I went to, that was the big thing, like interacting with that statue and taking those pictures, getting those photo ops in. And another great event from an early winter carnival, the snowshoe race. And there's some wonderful video that Michigan Tech Archives has for some early snowshoe races. So jumping up into the 40s, there was a new thing that started happening once it was Ripley Hill. Now it's currently called Mount Ripley, but they installed a ski tow in 1940s. So that's when the Michigan Amateur Ski Championship met, and it coincided with Winter Carnival. And they've continued that quite a bit throughout the years, having some interaction and competition on Mount Ripley that ties in on or near Winter Carnival. The 40s also saw changes in the snow statue competition as people were gaining more knowledge how to work in the snow medium. They were keeping notes and handing them off to future generations. So statues started getting more large and more intricate in terms of the detailing on the display. Some experimentation with ice within the snow sculptures as well, looking to craft, different things like windows and just creating different imagery within the statue. And we do know that there's some broader global events happening in the mid 40s. So 1943, Carnival started to fizzle out. There was a blizzard that actually ruined the snow statues that year. And then with what was happening in terms of the war threat, it just put a lot of the festivities on hold. And Carnival then resumed after the war in 1946. Something else that happened in 1946, the skits and performances started to become more competitive and not just performance based. So it was an actual element of participants' winter carnival score to have a successful skit. In that year of 1946, it took place in the Carriage Theater, which was located next to the Scott Hotel in Hancock. So if you know where La Cantina is now, right on the corner, right when you're coming into Hancock on Quincy Street, the Carriage Theater would have been just east of the Scott on that street, basically where that parking garage or the parking lot is now. Unfortunately, that beautiful building was lost to fire in 1959. But this is one of my favorite images of the carriage, not just because you get the full facade of the building, but I love the classic cars in this scene too. It's just a really neat photo. And then something else that the 40s brought to Carnival was a lot of fun in terms of fashion. The beard competition began in 1947, and I think this image on the left really sums it up. It's a young man with his chin stretched out to show off the little grains of beard that he's attempting to grow, and he couldn't be more proud. I think his fur coat has quite a bit more fur than his beard does, but it didn't dissuade him from entering the competition nonetheless. And right here, I don't know who these gentlemen are, but I presume that the older gentleman that's judging him is either a faculty member or perhaps a grad student. Because I do know just from different anecdotes and things that I've read, sometimes faculty and staff were judges of competitions, and then sometimes the queen and her court actually judged the beard competition in particular. So maybe in its early instances, it had more of that faculty staff approach. And then just a great image on the right here of Barbara Green, who was crowned the Winter Carnival Queen in 1947. I think her smile says it all. Like, Winter Carnival is a blast. And I think, you know, just looking how warm and welcoming that picture is, I have to believe that she was a great ambassador for the festivities that year. So moving into the 1950s, more changes were taking place. The Ice Review became a really popular piece of Winter Carnival at mid-century, and these skating spectacles took place at the D Stadium. And they were professionally crafted ice shows, but they were made up with local skaters. Sometimes members of the Tech Wives Club would participate in the ice skating review. And there were some really beautiful formal ice shows in the early 50s, and then it switched over to a more informal sort of recreational skating and dance party as the 50s went on. And then in 1953, they actually changed that element completely, and not to focus so much on the ice show or the skating element, but they created a gambling hall to sort of I guess pay homage to the boom copper days. Like, this is how they reimagined what it would have been like when the copper industry was in its heyday. There was a lot of money floating around, so they decided to create this gambling hall aesthetic. There were chorus lines, skits, and a soft drink bar. So I think those were just really delightful 1950s touches to that particular event. And then that did stay as a regular event until the 60s when it was renamed Fun Night. And just a couple little pictorial glimpses. So you'll notice as we're going on in the decades, we're coming up with a lot more photographic evidence. And this is just true of what we were able to save, what people thought to save, and what folks thought to donate to the archives. So as we're getting on in years, we're getting a lot more photographic evidence of what was happening at Winter Carnival. So this first picture on the left, an early Queen candidate, Mary Lou Solani in 1951. Another just joyful picture. And then this middle picture from an Ice Review star from 1958, wearing what appears to be a gorgeous ballerina's dress, but of course with those perfect toe picks for the skating show. And then this is a really neat photo of a statue, just looking at that gabled roof. This was one of the ones that was created in the 1950s. So you can only imagine the engineering marvel to work with snow to create a roof and an architectural structure quite like that. It's pretty amazing. And then it really was the peak year of the ice review in 1958. This picture on the left, there's some members of the Tech Wives Club and then just some local figure skaters. And then the actual ice review itself, there's some young figure skaters in their costumes at the ice review. And this is actually quite amazing. I don't know, Janet, if you want to give like a quick little intro to how we got introduced to Bill Bowman, and then one of us can tell the story.
So Bill Bowman was in charge as part of the Blue Key Club. And so I may get this wrong, Bill, so forgive me. He was in charge of selecting the judges, and he did a good job. There was a local merchant and a local, politician and, some respectable people in the community who were then judging the competition. And so as a result of Bill Bowman's leadership, the winner that year was the Tech Wives Club. Now, I don't quite understand what the Tech Wives Club is, and maybe you can explain that, Lindsay. But Bill, I think you showed excellent leadership, with your decisions you made that year. So nice job. And I understand you've invited several other people from your yearbook. So Peter, Bill, Fred, and Ivers, I think are joining us tonight. So welcome.
Yeah, I did see some of those names that came through that email thread. Like they're with us tonight, so welcome especially. And I'm not sure if I'm allowed to spill the beans on some of the behind the scenes, but I think I will. But I'll try to give the polite version because I think it really was done in good faith. So there was a different statue that actually, in terms of the scoring system that Bill helped create, it was up as the ranking system of 10 scores from poor to good, but comedy was not a specific factor that should have been taken into account when they were doing their scoring rubric. And, there was a statue that was created, let's see, it was Class B from folks from DHH Hall called the Dorm Rats, I believe. And they actually had the most points in terms of scoring, but their statue was essentially an outhouse built on top of a different outhouse. One was labeled professors and one was labeled students. The one on the top was labeled professors and the one below it was labeled students. It was a quirk that got some laughs from the judging crew, and they did actually kind of put some comedy points into their score, but Bill made the executive decision in very good faith to give the winning statue for Class B to the Tech Wives, who built this really intricate 10-foot plus statue of this ostrich pulling this woman in a cart. Just a really fun, whimsical statue. So while the other one had its comedy element, I think there was some artistry that they wanted to make sure was appreciated in the ostrich.
Well, and the statute of limitations is passed, Bill.
Right.
So have no fear. You can retain your degree.
Yep, I think it's all in good fun, and I stand by his executive decision. And thanks, Bill, for sharing that story. I think that really speaks to why there are so many alumni in this event, is because Winter Carnival is such a beloved tradition, and the memories are so strong because we're able to collaborate, get together with one another, and just have fun. Every generation has their piece that made it sparkle. And I think hearing these stories and these shared lived experiences is what helps make this carnival story so rich. So thanks, Bill, for sharing that. So moving into the 60s, as I mentioned, Fun Night was replaced by a concert series in 1962. The 4 preps performed, and that was sponsored by the Student Council. And then back to the ski hill were some of the early iterations of the flare pageant. So they did have some attempts in earlier decades to do a one-off flare pageant, which is a torchlit parade down the ski hill, creating different patterns. But it was in the early 60s that it truly got rekindled, and it started to become more of a regular element. Folks that have been to more recent carnivals may know it as the torchlight parade, when you see just those wonderful colored torchbearers coming down the slopes. It really is quite a thing to see, especially on a calm winter evening. And then one thing about Winter Carnival traditions, all the contests and all the things that we do, not everyone stood the test of time. Some, they tried it out, maybe it wasn't a success, or maybe it was just a one-off that they did because there was a really enthusiastic leader in a particular year. And in 1963, there is one such example of that with the Tall Tales tournament. It was a storytelling tournament that lasted a couple of years, I believe, but I don't think it got outside of the 60s. And with that, we're on to our next poll question. So in 1966, Winter Carnival organizers started shipping snowballs out of state to a sister university so they could have a snowball fight to coincide with our Winter Carnival. Which was that lucky school that was chosen to partake in that event? Janet, do you want to read the options?
Yep. And so there's 4 choices: Virginia Tech, Colorado School of Mines, Southwest Texas State University, and University of Texas at Austin. All right. And we have a whole bunch of people voting, and it's pretty mixed. It's pretty mixed. So
yeah, pretty even strength right about now for choices.
yeah.
Yep, we're just over 80% respondents. So I'll go ahead and let's get to the answer. It was actually Southwest Texas State University. So this was started and they actually shipped out roughly 500 pounds of snowballs. They would package them up, like clearly they were handcrafted here in the Upper Peninsula. They'd box them up and then they would ship them out. So it's quite interesting. This particular image isn't from the 60s, but it does show that it was really a joint effort. But this one is from the year, the Frigid Fairy Tales theme. So they even special labeled the parcels that were headed down south. And what a fun memory for the people that got to participate in that. Maybe we'll hear some stories. Maybe we have a snowball maker in the audience tonight. Who knows? So with that picture bringing the 70s, let's talk about what was happening in that decade. So really the traditions were formalized, and the ones that were sticking on really strongly, such as the statues, queen competition, and the various sports elements, they became larger than life in the 70s. There was really a lot going on in terms of making sure that the traditions remained. The statues got bigger, the queen competition started planning in October, the year before the event. It was really becoming more of a multi-month and multi-team effort to make sure that Carnival was going off without a hitch, and that we were also bringing in folks from all across the upper Great Lakes to come participate, to be visitors, to engage. And the skits competition entries were at maximum capacity. The halls were filled, and the concert series also blossomed during this time. And that takes us to just some cool images and some cool memories about cultural stuff that was taking place. So here's a very fun and whimsical image from the First Place skit from 1970. So we actually, within our Copper Country Historical Images database, we had an alum, I hope I pronounced this right, Greg Swidich. He commented, he's the class of 72. And back in 2008, he commented on this in our digital archive, and he remembered the planning for this skit. And like the premise was that these 4 were supposed to be new recruits and like the ROTC commander's quote unquote worst nightmare. So they were just a ragtag bunch of misfits, and they were trying to, just get a laugh. But as you can see, the costume design is pretty perfect. I can only imagine what it was like to see this live. But Greg was so gracious to share that one of the elements for his particular character, which I don't know which one he is in the image, but during rehearsal, he made some mistakes. He had a wrong turn, and then he had to hustle and catch up with the rest of the crew. And that had the guys in stitches while they were practicing. So then it ended up staying in the final production to much rowdy applause. Like it was really well appreciated by those participating and viewing the skit too. So I love to hear those stories because you get a sense of the magic and what it was like to be there for sure.
Well, and I got to try to describe this. I've been analyzing it, trying to figure out. I think these were gentlemen with their hands like this, with like a bag over their head, And what we were seeing is their faces were their stomachs with with noses and mouths draw around their belly buttons. So it's just really hilarious looking.
Yeah, I can imagine some of the body dynamics to actually create the illusion that they're whistling or talking or something. So probably a lot of good physical comedy in that skit for sure.
They're funny pictures.
And then, going from the more whimsical to just talking about the beauties and the beards, there was a lot of involvement. So once the queen was selected, her and her court did start to take more of a role in judging the beard competition. So here's some great images from beard judging in the 1970s. Just really nice images of young women looking at beard length, texture, there's a lot of different things that went into judging a successful beard. And as you can see, the beards are getting a little bigger compared to that 1947 image that I showed when maybe he was just starting on his beard journey in that particular photo. And then just a really wonderful, there aren't a lot of images that have gone through any sort of colorization. So just some really wonderful colorized photos. You can see the pinks and the greens and the blues and the young women's sweaters. And just a really great horse and sleigh photo of some of the queen candidates. And then this is one of our more popular Carnival queens, Danny Croom. When I was doing research, she was, from what I've been able to glean, the first African-American queen that was coronated as part of Winter Carnival. But she was also one of the most popular queens in terms of the amount of images that were available about her. There's a lot of great short biographical notes and just wonderful pictures. So it's great to see that. And with that, another thing that happened in the 70s, the Guess Who, that famous Canadian band, actually came to Winter Carnival. What year did they perform at the event?
All right, so we have four choices: 1977, 1978, 1979, or 1980. All right, and we've got a tie for 78 and 79 going on so far.
Yeah, that looks like
actually it's almost even. People know it was in the 70s.
Yeah, they're zeroing in on the year too. It's neck and neck between 79 and 78. So I think we got some alum that this is right in their wheelhouse.
We may have some alum here who went to it. All right, what's the answer?
So the answer is they rocked the Sherman Gym in 79. And this is just a great press photo of the band. And, there's been a lot of memories, I think, about the performances that have come in for Winter Carnival, not just in terms of getting some chart topping, like, real famous, like international and national acts in terms of music, but also as we get on into like the 80s, 90s, and 2000s, like just the comedic talent that was coming in, a lot of comedians, some magicians, a hypnotist, like just different folk coming in to perform either in Sherman, and then once the Rosé was built in the Rosé Center, there's just no shortage of talent came through the Michigan Tech community as part of Winter Carnival. Hopefully people will share some good memories from that. All right, so getting into the 80s. So traditions are strong and they continue to grow. And in the 80s, we do see a continued rejuvenation and expansion of the snow statue program. And we get to hear, under the cloak of darkness or like behind closed doors about these statue secrets, things that are handed down within Greek organizations, or like this was happening throughout the early years of Carnival as we were learning more about the technology of building a snow statue. But then as designs got more intricate, folks started to get a little more covetous of the secret knowledge it took to make some of those special effects, whether it's the chain link or creating a stained glass window effect with just, working with ice. So some of these started to be passed down, and, there's some things I've heard through the grapevine about some tiffs if people gave out the secret that they weren't supposed to share with so-and-so. So there's a lot of fun energy happening around that. And around this time in the 80s, we also see a shift just in terms of personal capability for engaging with visual technology. Personal cameras are a lot more affordable. There's a faster turnaround time for developing film. So we're seeing a really large uptick in terms of people visually documenting the story of Winter Carnival, not just looking at, oh, I'm viewing a completed snow statue, but people doing more of that photo documentation of the actual building, what it's like behind the scenes at certain events. So rather than just seeing, a crowned queen, or rather than just seeing a completed statue, we're seeing more about, like scaffolding, like getting statue supplies together. We're seeing the sound crew at Winter Carnival events like the Queen's competition or different concerts. We're turning the lens inward and also behind the curtain. So we're getting more of that complete story as we get into the 80s. And then really there's just been it's hard to pick when you have to condense 100 years into 45 minutes. So picking images for this was really challenging, but this is a really great one from 1983. Sailed the ocean for the wizard's potion. Just this beautiful castle structure with amazing detail, wonderful dragon, and it's huge, and it's just quite a sight to see. And then a really interesting saloon photo, like even the detail on the curtains, like you can see the riveting within like the different folding of the drapery. Like you get the sense that that's an actual textile and not just snow. So the things that our students and our community can do with snow is nothing short of amazing. So this is just a glimpse at some construction in 1984. And then just another example of marvelous detail. This is a rustic bridge. You get the illusion of the stonework on the bridge, and then a horse and rider crossing over. And this is also from 1984. So I want to tap Cynthia for a minute. So as we've been talking about sort of this era of Carnival, do you want to share a personal memory or an anecdote from around this time?
Well, gee, I will say I remember I'm an Alpha Delta Alpha, and we used to have the Queen's competition. It was at Hancock High School back then, I believe, wasn't it? And had some fun times being in Queen skits with my sorority sisters. When they have to put on talent, we always try to help out. So we would put on funny skits with them. So that's one of my favorite memories of that time. And where are the Queen's competition held now? Is it in the Rosé Center? I don't know where they do it now.
Yeah, so for recent years, it has been held in the Rosé, and for folks that are interested for it this year, I do share the link for the Blue Key website at the end. You can go there and get the full schedule for all events, and they'll give you the times and locations for those. So yeah, jumping into the 90s, we start to see an expansion of the games and contests section. So, the tried and true stuff is staying, but we're starting to see a lot more innovation in terms of some of the sporting elements. There was a tug of war on ice that was added to be followed by human bowling, which involves basically a saucer, and this takes place in the ice rink or in an outdoor rink some years depending. But essentially you create a human bowling ball out of a person on a saucer, and then you slide them into the pins. That was just a fun element. And then it's just very visually interesting for spectators to watch this. So it's a really popular one for that town and gown connections. You see a lot of families going to that particular event just because it's really fun to watch. And then the human dog sled race, it had its origins in the mid-century when it really became a staple of Winter Carnival, but it was coming back in the 1990s. It regained popularity, and it's been tried and true, and it's stayed with us these last few decades. And we do have a human dog sled race for 2022 as well. But just, yeah, like I said, looking at some more behind the scenes images, even in the 90s, this is a great picture of the Winter Carnival Queen competition behind the scenes crew. So they're doing all the sound, making sure all the lighting goes off without a hitch. So it's not just the MC, it's not just the candidates on the stage, it's also the production crew, like making sure that we could have these wonderful programs that take place and have all those special touches that you'd expect. And then this is just a great picture of former President Tompkins with the Winter Carnival Queen from 1998. Smiles all around, as they say. And then this is one of my personal favorite statues. I remember this one. I was 16 in 1998, and I remember going to check this out after a long ice session at the SEC. But I remember walking all around to see those statues. So it was nice to see this again in this image form. Icy story of Lumberjack's glory. And we have Babe the Blue Ox. And it's in Paul Bunyan. So just a really fun statue. And here we are with the ice bowling. So you can have the image to go with the concept of it. Just a group of guys flinging their friend at full speed. Out of frame are the pins that they are hurling their friend into, but it really is just quite a wacky event and just a lot of fun. And safety, he has a helmet on, so hopefully it's all good. All right, so we're getting close to time. I want to be sure to leave some opportunity for questions and answers, and also just if people want to share their stories, because like I said, this is just my take, pulling some images to dance you across the timeline of Winter Carnival, but this is just the tip of the iceberg. Like, there's a lot to explore. But within the 2000s, something that has been really loved by the community, Michigan Tech and the local community, are the fireworks spectaculars that have been taking place on Mont Ripley, and then the Torchlight Parade. The 2000s has shown some pretty epic fireworks displays on the area, and there's really beautiful images that are in the university marketing and communication collection that document that. And also the Winter Carnival photo contest, where people from the campus community can actually compete to have like a winning photo documenting the visual story of Winter Carnival. There's some wonderful fireworks photos in that. Varsity hockey continues to be really popular. Like, good luck getting a ticket to the games during Winter Carnival. My birthday falls in February, and it has been my dream to like rent a box one year to like go with my friends and family around Winter Carnival. And every year, like I reach out to athletics, and they're booked like so solid, like, so dare to dream. But if you ever want to help a friend out, get me a hockey ticket for Winter Carnival.
Hey, Lindsay, my birthday's in early February too. Maybe we should join forces.
That sounds good. Let's talk about that for next year.
All right.
And then I really have to say, like, the talent that's been coming through that Rosé stage in recent years. Bob Saget just passed away recently, but he came, I believe, in 2014. John Oliver, his recollections of his time in the Upper Peninsula has gone viral. It's just been something that he never expected. And then I think the Michigan Tech community never expected it to just be so popular, even outside of our community, like his take of his experience here. But yeah, Judah Friedlander, Josh Blue, just to name a couple. There's been many more, but it's been great to see what the Winter Carnival organizers have been able to do, and just what they do for the community, just because they want us all to enjoy this time. And it really is a community event. This is one of my favorite pictures, just people walking around to explore the statues. Imagine being that age. It's a picture of a young child in the mouth of a shark statue, like fitting in ever so perfectly into the shark's smile. I bet that child like remembers that Winter Carnival to this day and will never forget it, because it's just one of those magical things. And when you can interact with the statues, you're definitely creating some lasting memories and these beautiful photo ops. So then we have them to share with everybody in the years ahead. And then this is another really cool statue. This is from the frat that's over in Hancock, but they do such wonderful statues that people make the trek off campus to go view this. From this particular year, it was the Beauty Belle Finds, and it's a Beauty and the Beast themed statue. So there's this beautiful castle work, and then all the intricate little details that you might think of from Beauty and the Beast, like the candlestick and the teapot, like made out of ice and snow. And really the picture doesn't do it justice. It's just a really neat statue. And then speaking of really neat, lighting up the night, there's this fireworks spectacular. And I'll share one memory of my own personal experience. So before the Hampton Inn took over that hotel space, it went through many iterations, but up on the 7th floor, they had a bar and a restaurant, and the windows looked directly across the canal over to Mont Ripley. And it was like, you had to get there like hours in advance to like get a seat. Some years you actually had to reserve a table weeks in advance to get in. But the views from that 7th floor, like fishbowl bar room up there, like my brother-in-law, Bob Hiltunen, is a local musician, and he used to play up there many years on the weekend of Winter Carnival. So we were somehow able to like get a small table right next to the window and like just listening to this awesome music. And then this beautiful fireworks display, it was like, it took my breath away, and it's something I'll never forget. And this picture is amazing, but it's nothing like experiencing it for real. So if you ever can get up and get some good viewing, maybe not in that particular place, because I don't know if the Hampton Inn is going to keep a bar structure up there, but definitely there's a lot of good viewing from Houghton looking across. So what's on deck for this year? The countdown is on. We are just about 2 weeks and 2 days, so 16 days until Winter Carnival officially commences. Our theme this year is Come One, Come All to our 100th Carnival. Special events include all of our tried and true favorites, like the statue competition, the queen competition, of course. The comedian is Drew Lynch this year. All the good sporting events like broom ball, skiing, the human dog sled, ice bowling, all that good stuff. And that's just to name a few. There's so much going on, and it's a family-friendly event. So just check out the Blue Key website for details. That's www.mtu.edu/carnival/2022. And with that, we're racing to fun then and now. The dog sled race and its early iterations and a more recent iteration. And I think the smiles say it all. It's just a lot of fun to participate or to watch. So if you're so inclined and you want to check it out, just check out the schedule for sure. And with that, I will just say thank you. And there's my contact information. If you have any questions or ideas, feel free to reach out anytime. I'm so grateful for those that decided to join us. And as Cynthia mentioned, the archives does collect ephemera, photographs, items related to Winter Carnival. In fact, one of my dreams is to get a couple iterations of queen crowns, even if not to be permanently donated, at least to be put on loan to have some future Winter Carnival display of the crowns. So if you know anyone that won, have them reach out to me so we can work that out. But really, any story, any memory, any photo, and you want to donate it, just reach out to Cynthia or myself and we'll get you set up. But with that, I think we can open up the floor.
Well, gosh, Lindsay, thank you so much. And there's quite a few questions, so I'm going to make an executive decision to extend questions to 7:15 because we literally have 33 open questions.
Oh, wow.
and so Cindy, some of these are really quick. I just want to remark that Angela was part of the dog sledding that was happening in the 80s, and she ran as a freshman in 85. And off to you, Cynthia.
Okay. Yeah, so here's some questions. I was just reading through here. Oh, I just wanted to comment that my old neighbor from Jasper Street, Jim Sickolo, was telling me next week's program about the Highway Brewing Company, or about beer and brewing. He wanted to mention that the Highway Brewing Company has an MTU connection. So we have yet another Michigan Tech brewery story, it sounds like, Janet.
That's great.
All right.
Oh my gosh.
Question-wise, an interesting point, John Helga I hope I'm pronouncing your last name right. He said he was the president of Blue Key in '76, and that was the last year that Blue Key was 100% male. That year, they selected 3 outstanding female undergrads to be the first in Blue Key. So I wrote that down so we can see if we can document that in Wikipedia. So he was wondering how many females are currently in Blue Key, and gosh, I'm not sure.
I don't know, but I will say that the female representation has continued to grow, not just in Blue Key, but I would say in student orgs across campus. But yeah, Blue Key continues to be, I would say, fairly more inclusive than it had been. So yeah, let's keep that going.
Yeah, in the '80s, I recall having lots of, I had sorority sisters and roommates that were involved. So definitely, we had a lot of female participation. Jim Schluckmeyer is asking a question about that early king statue with the women on the statue there. He was wondering if that was in front of the old ROTC building. It looked like it in the background.
Yeah,
I thought so.
that's
Yeah.
what I gleaned from that too, just based on placement. I think that you're dead on with that. That would be my guess too, based on the building structure, even the glimpse that you get.
Well,
Yeah,
and does
Stephen.
Go ahead. I was going to say, so we'll answer that one live. Does Stephen asks, do they ever use color in the statues?
So color actually isn't permitted in the statues except for on their title. So they're allowed to create colorization as for their statue name, but not in the actual statue itself. If there's any sort of I guess color in the snow, so if there maybe some remnants, like if they got some snow that had like some mud or like some like street salt into it, that because it's like a part of the snow, but they're not allowed to purposely color anything.
Good to know.
Robert Slode is asking about a collection of J.W. Nara photographs. Do you have them at the Michigan Tech Archives? He had a bunch of photography book from the early 20th century. He was wondering.
Yeah, absolutely. We have a really, I would say, a premier collection of J.W. Nara's photographs, his studio and his open air photography. There's just a lot of great stuff there. And really documenting not just things at Michigan Tech, but across the region. And then some other photographers that we have that are really popular in terms of research usage. The J.T. Reeder collection, who was another early 20th century copper country photographer. The Bill Brinkman collection gets a lot of use. And then the Daily Mining Gazette photo collection has a lot of good mid-century stuff, mid to late century, but really good images. Thanks for that.
And Matthew asks, when did Blue Key start being the primary organizer for Winter Carnival? And he points out he should know this.
Yeah, so when it was resumed in 1936, because there was that little hiatus around the Depression era, and people missed Winter Carnival, like for going on hiatus for those 3-4 years in the early 30s. It upset people. People were looking forward to it as an event. So Blue Key took that ownership to get it going, and they've been involved actively since the mid-30s.
Neat. Now, Dan Flynn is asking, what year was broomball added? And I'd like to say that I played broomball in the 80s, so it was at least back when dinosaurs roamed the earth back in the 1980s. But we did not wear any kind of protection, no knee pads, no helmets, no nothing. A friend of mine got her front tooth knocked out playing broomball back in the 80s. Now it is, everybody's all bundled up when they play. But anyway, do you know when it started, Lindsay?
I don't know that officially, but I know what I know in terms of seeing it. And I know I've seen photos of it from the early 80s and the late 70s. But that's where I would defer to alumni. Like, what are your memories? Yeah, like talk amongst yourselves, because that's something that you can help educate us archivists too. Like, we're keepers of the records, but there's so much stuff. Like, it would take me 10 lifetimes to get through everything that's in the archive. So when we can learn little anecdotal things like that to help share that story and keep the memory alive, especially about something that people love like broomball, yeah, just reach out if you happen to know early origin stories.
Yeah, it would be great. In fact, for our Wikipedia editing, if you've got a picture of yourself playing or your team playing Roomba with, and you know what year it is, and you send it to us, that would help us quite a bit. We could start to put together the history of that.
Yeah.
I did see it. Oh, someone asked, I'm going to ask one more, Janet, before I pass it back to you. What did skits begin right at the very beginning? When did they start? Do we know?
So there were performances in those early carnivals, but they were more just for performance sake. It wasn't until several decades into Carnival that they started to be part of the overall like competition scoring element of Carnival. But I would say, yeah, right from the get-go, there was at least some element of troupe performance. And in fact, in the early 1920s, the Michigan Tech troupe that was doing some of the performance in those early carnivals did go out and did some touring throughout the region to promote Michigan Tech, to promote the carnival. They were mildly well received, but it wasn't until skits had that competition element that they started to gain more popularity.
Well, and so Paul asks, did Southwest Texas State send something back to Tech in exchange for all our free snowballs?
So I've heard that they did, but I've never seen any documentary evidence of this or what it was, like if they sent something fun from down in their neck of the woods, or if it was just a gracious thank you letter. I don't know that, and you know that's something I want to talk to the Alumni Association about, because I think there's some institutional memory there that I just haven't tapped into yet.
Well, and Lindsay, you can go ahead and stop sharing
Sure,
so people can see you when you answer. And
absolutely.
Cynthia.
Yeah, there's another question here. Robert Carnahan is remembering a plea to East Lansing to install artificial ice in the D in 1951 and 52. Do you have any